Hey everybody, welcome to another mob farm video. Today I want to make a Q&A video about the shifting floor mob farm because I received a lot of basic questions and I think answering this in video form might help you understand the design principles of mob farm a little bit better. Alright, let's get started. TJ2003 was asking, what if we build it so it only takes 4 subchunks and what are the rates of both the farms? And he's also asking if expanding a roof by 5 more blocks would even get faster spawns. So let's try to answer the first question first. What would happen if you build this farm low in the world? So if you have a perimeter, would this help much? And it probably doesn't, because I designed the farm in a way that after 5 seconds the mob cap should be filled up in most of the cases. And yeah, if you build it lower, the spawn rates are higher. So there's a slightly higher chance that the mob cap is actually filled up, but you wouldn't, at a certain point you don't get additional spawns. So you just have more mob spawns per spawning space, but since the clock is not changed, you still have a full mob cap after about 5 seconds and it just cleared. So I already did a 10-minute test and we can check the results with counter. So in total we got 45,000 drops per hour if you build this on a perimeter. So this is pretty much the same as if you build it above sea level. This was 42,000, so just 3,000 drops more per hour. Wouldn't make much of a difference. But you could adjust this by changing the clock. Instead of activating the shifting floors every 5 seconds, we activate them every about 2.5 seconds now. And this would actually increase the rates by a lot. So we're getting almost 56,000 drops per hour now, with the same amount of spawning spaces, since it's just a bit lower. But the disadvantage is that we would create a bit more lag. So the farm isn't really optimized anymore for low Y values. I would definitely recommend to get rid of 2 more layers and try it again, because then we also would build the farm in just the lowest 3 subchunks, and this should increase the spawning rates even more. Could even debate if you would get away with only using 2 layers instead. So I'm gonna quickly MC edit this. So now we have the farm just built in the lowest 3 subchunks, and the spawning rates per spawning space are a lot higher. That's why we can get away with using just 2 layers instead of 5, which we would use above sea level. And the rates are still just as good. So if we do the counter, we get 43,000 drops per hour, which is even slightly more than with the 5 layers at sea level. And that's really the big advantage of building a farm in the perimeter, that you need to spend less materials and also it creates less lag, since you need to cover less spawning spaces. If your goal would be to get as many drops as possible with a mob farm in the perimeter, then you need to adjust it in a different way. Then your goal is to kill the mobs as quickly as possible while providing enough spawning spaces. The general rule is the faster your mob farm is, the more spawning spaces it requires. If I would activate this mob farm just every 10 seconds, then 1 spawning layer would be enough. This is even less effort and even less lag. So if you want to make it the fastest possible shifting floor mob farm, I would probably try to make a single layer and try to activate the clock every second. And instead of using a 30 by 30 single layer, I would probably use a 100 by 100 single layer with a giant item collection system. And this could probably push the rates close to 85 to 90,000. But at this point, it's probably better to use a different mob farm concept, which would be even faster. You might also be wondering what's a good way to find out how often to activate the farm, or what's the interval between activations. So I could use carpet mod again, and there's the spawn tracking command. So it tells me that we have 48 mobs on average, and 2.6 of the spawning attempts fail because the mob cap is full. So if I would, for example, make the farm even a bit slower and add more repeaters, so we activate it every 6 point something seconds, then the rates wouldn't even be that much lower. Okay, let's try this instead. And I make So with the activation every 6.8 seconds, the farm isn't even that much slower. So we are still getting 40,500 drops on average per hour, and we're having 53 mobs out of the 70 possible. and 10% of the spawning attempts fail because the mob cap is full. And this is pretty much basically where you can play around. If your goal is to make a mob farm as fast as possible, we actually try to push that value close to 65, and then it also doesn't matter if you lose 30 or 40% of the spawning attempts, if the goal is just to make it as fast as possible. And we also use more spawning spaces and really push the farm until the point where lag becomes an issue again. So next question by Christian Biscard. Should I build this one or the flushing type version you showed long ago? Yeah, you have to decide this for yourself. I mean, I've given the rates, I've given the materials that are required. Lag is pretty much on the same level with the flushing type farm and with the shifting floor farm. The shifting floor farm is even slightly bit better. But the disadvantage is that you get no spider drops with the shifting floor farm. So if you want the spider drops, then build a flushing type farm. If you care for more gunpowder and bones, then build the shifting floor farm, definitely. So next question by Jerb, would it work on a server? Definitely it does work on servers. Vanilla single player is the same as vanilla multiplayer when it comes to game mechanics, so there's no difference at all. The only thing you need to consider is that other players also load mobs and they could mess with the mob cap. So usually per player you have 70 mobs in a world, and if the second player is in an area where there's a lot of mobs spawning and they could persist in caves, then he pretty much occupies the full mob cap for himself, and then it doesn't matter to stand above the farm, the mob cap is filled by the mobs that are near the second player. So the farm would definitely only work best if you're alone on the server, or a second player knows what you're doing and is also maybe standing up in the sky and doesn't fill the mob cap with mobs around him. Raymond Potgieter is asking, could it be possible to replace soulsand with grass path? Mobs don't spawn on grass paths, so you need to use soulsand. Raoul RA is asking, the farm can be built in the nether? Yes, you can build such a farm in the nether, and you get a nice gold farm. So I tested this out, got about 15,000 gold nuggets with this farm, which is quite decent. Obviously you need to adjust it, instead of using mega blocks, use slabs in order to make it spawn proof, and here also make the side wiring spawn proof, and you can't use water, just used MC edit to get it in, so you would need also to adjust the item transport. You could also adjust the fall height, since you don't need the full fall height for the witches anymore, so you could adjust this farm definitely for the nether. If you build it above the bedrock, then obviously you still want to build it as low as possible, so you probably would have your spawning layers somewhere around 156 and your AFK spot at Y255. Peter Clark is saying, hopefully the new drowned mob doesn't ruin the use of deep oceans for farm locations. So the new drowned mobs shouldn't be an issue at all, they spawn really slowly. So if at all, they reduce the rates slightly, and you can easily combat the problem by placing some glowstone or sea lantern blocks in the water in order to prevent drowned spawning. Andrew is wondering if the farm would work with endermen, and the answer is no. The endermen would teleport away when they get hit by the shifting floor. Next, Mormorio 13 is asking, is there a way to turn the farm off and avoid mob spawning? You would need to change it a little bit. So you could place redstone lamps on top of those observers and power them from the side. But then you need to add an additional gap in between. So over here, build it up. So it would look like this. Instead of having the pistons almost back to back, you would have a block in between. So like this. And here would be the next observer layer, and then you can place a block that can be powered between the redstone lamps and put redstone dust on top. It shouldn't matter too much if there's the occasional repeater in between. I think the light should be enough. So next, the Colorman is asking, what if I build a 120 by 120 farm 5 layers on a server? The farm would actually be slower than the 60 by 60 farm with 3 layers. And yeah, the server would lag a lot. So at a certain point, additional spawning spaces don't make sense. Once you reach a certain threshold point, then the only thing that matters is to kill the mobs quicker. Diastine is asking, can I make this farm high in the sky? Because in the sky there's no cave. This is actually thoroughly explained in the other video, I think. So the AFK spot, if you build it above an ocean, is above 180, and mobs that are further away than 128 blocks from the player would despawn instantly. So there's really no point in building this farm any higher, but technically you could build it at Y200 if you really wanted to. Then you could pretty much stand next to the farm instead of above it, but the spawning rates would be lower and you would need more spawning spaces in order to achieve the same rates. Next one, Doragoon1 is asking, no spiders. Could this be adapted to be a creeper only farm for getting gunpowder? Alright, first one, yeah, this farm doesn't work with spiders since the spiders are too large, they can't spawn in between the trapdoors. And also they wouldn't glitch through since they would stand on multiple blocks, so the shifting floor concept doesn't work unless you would shift all the floors at the same time. I made an adjusted farm that would work with spiders, but yeah, it's a lot bulkier and begs the question if it's worth it. But it would at least work, so you could spawn spiders in between the cobble walls like this. And then if you activate this with a double piston extender, also the double piston extenders are activated at the same time, then you could glitch the spiders through and also the normal mobs. Let's get a creeper. Spiders at the same time. But I'm not sure if that's really worth it. Right, and the second question, creeper only. This definitely works, but unfortunately only for single layer. So what you need to, in order to prevent other mobs spawning, is put a trapdoor at the eye level of most of the mobs. This prevents them from spawning. Since creepers are shorter, they can spawn below. But obviously mobs from higher levels or layers, they would fall on top of those trapdoors. So this would be the flaw. But if you, for example, have a perimeter and can build this farm really low, so it would only require a single layer, so something like this farm here, instead of 30 by 30, maybe 40 by 40, and a single layer, then this would actually be a good creeper only farm. No, actually, you even need more spawning space since it's creeper only. Yeah, I would probably go for a single layer and 60 by 60 or even 80 by 80 for a good creeper only farm in a perimeter. Then it would definitely make sense. Also, a slight problem we are having here is that we kind of require this trapdoor, which we don't have at the other farm, but the observer would update the trapdoor all the time. So we also would lose a spawning space here. You could just keep this closed, but then the creeper wouldn't spawn there. But at least it would work. So there were a few more questions that went in the same direction as the first question. Adjusting the farm in size and where to build it, etc. So just follow the basic mob farm principles. The faster your farm is or the more drops power you want to get, the quicker you need to kill the mobs. And the quicker you kill the mobs, the more spawning spaces you need. If you make the farm slower, then you also require less spawning spaces. For example, I could easily adjust this farm and make it only work for a single layer. And then I only need to activate it every 10 seconds. This would halve the rates, but makes it a lot lag friendly and even less effort to build. Alright, then there were some questions that were already answered in the last video. For example, where's the best AFK spot? Just watch the other video again. This was answered in the last one. Alright, thanks a lot for watching. Have a nice day. Bye bye.